All right, so I'm a software developer in the technology office at SAS in North Carolina. Today we're going to walk through the SAS case study, take a look at how we're exploring the use of Cloud Foundry to develop and deliver software for our customers. As I was going through, I kept going back to my days as a chemistry minor and kept thinking about a lab. So we're going to start with a baseline, talk about our purpose, why Cloud Foundry is of interest to a company like SAS, look at the actual investigation, what we did, what we learned from that, and take a peek at what might be next after that process is complete. I, too, have a legal slide here. It might be a drinking game. I'm on East Coast time, so it's afternoon. It's perfectly fine. So don't get mad if we don't do what I say we might do. Let's start off looking at SAS. SAS is an independent software vendor. We sell our software to customers. They take that, they deploy that on-premise in their own IT environments. There's a mix of physical and virtual environments that we see there. And SAS itself has a growing hosting and software as a service part of the organization. Overall, we got somewhere around 70,000 customers and about 150 products, depending on who's counting what on what day of the week. So our interest is not just about new development of stuff on Cloud Foundry, but also about moving those current products and suites into that environment. Some of those products have been around for a long time. SAS, the company, is about 38 years old, but the software actually started as a research project in NC State and was developed on punch cards even before the company was created. And those first systems, if I stacked the cards on the stage here next to me, they'd be about 40 feet high. I don't know quite how high the ceiling is, but they'd be up there pretty good. You can see some of that history in SAS, the programming language, with things like our card statement. That was an indicator that the next set of punch cards that came through the system contained data for the program to operate on, not actually part of the instructions itself. So you could kind of think maybe this is one of the first places where SAS entangled itself with the platform it was running on top of. Eventually, new systems arise, punch cards go extinct, and SAS has an opportunity to relook at how to do that data. And so we can redefine how we read data in, and we come up with something that's a true innovation. We come up with the data line statement. It has no relationship to that card statement at all, right? It looks way, way different. And so it's that spirit of radical innovation and disruption that we and I am bringing to our investigation of Cloud Foundry. But in all seriousness, SAS has been around a long time. There's a lot of change that has happened in the industry over that time. And that change has driven SAS to redefine itself, its architecture and platforms, as necessary. So we started with IBM Assembler and PL1 running on mainframes. Eventually, Unix workstations and PCs come along, and SAS rewrote the analytics engine that underlies all of its value into C. And we have two major code bases with the same stuff going along for some period of time here. That C got backported to the mainframe at some point. The IBM Assembler was retired, and we created the multi-vendor architecture, MVA, where there's this one set of code capable of running across many different kinds of operating system platforms. Client-server models come along, and SAS invests and investigates into the Java language, right, for the cross-platform capabilities, a continuation of our desire for portability. Web applications and the need for less of a client footprint. And so SAS creates middle tier and web applications for all these products that it's had. Most recently, we've had larger product bundles. We've tried to deploy into more complex customer IT environments. It's driven a need for common components to handle these requirements, and then a need for us to be able to allow those common components to evolve independently of the solutions that are using them. And so we've introduced some service-oriented architectural concepts to the system. That leaves us today with this basic picture of a SaaS solution. So for our investigation of Cloud Foundry, we're going to look at three of the tiers here: the web tier, the services tier, and our data tier. The compute tier, rather. Web and services tier for SAS, they're running on the JVM. Mostly it's Java code. We've got standard kind of library dependencies, Spring and related projects, and they're running on TC Server, which is a Tomcat version of things. We've got this set of common infrastructure services. It's all the stuff you'd expect to behave the same across the system, across those product suites. Security, configuration, licensing controls, those kind of things. And our solutions and applications, they deploy alongside those other pieces. They're going to build their own domain services and then build user interfaces both on top of their domain and on top of our common infrastructure bits. All of that sitting on top of the core of the SAS analytics value chain, which is the compute tier and our analytics servers. Those are written mostly in C and C++. So for our investigation of Cloud Foundry, we've got to both port our applications there and make these analytic pieces readily available to them once they're running in that environment. So with that background, let's talk about what drove SAS to look at Cloud Foundry. My group, the technology office, we try to tie business drivers and quality attributes of the software we want at SAS to the work of the R&D organization. Stuff can start off as you're chasing this shiny technical object, but it needs to feed back into the business at some point. Cloud Foundry has some obvious ones. Cloud's right there in the name. Most vendors today have some sort of cloud story. And Cloud Foundry supports a lot of the quality attributes we want. The scalability, availability, reliability, those kind of things are all the things we want our applications to do. There's one a little bit beneath the surface, or at least it's beneath the surface a little bit to me, and that's a need for developers. To have a good developer experience, enable developers to write code with SAS. SAS started as a programming language many years ago, right? And for a long time, that was the interface to SAS and to those analytics, was people writing SAS code. We've evolved over time and have modern user interfaces, but the core of that value is still in the language and still in those back-end analytics servers. Most of our solutions and applications on top, they're generating SAS code and sending it to that back end. For SAS today, developers are a force multiplier for our software. It's great that we're able to ship these modern user interfaces and have users get access to results without having to write code. But we can truly show value when we get embedded in other parts of the organization and there's no SAS user interface in sight, where the processes are coming through our systems as well. In the past, people have extended SAS solutions by writing SAS code, and we still want that today. But more and more, we're seeing a need for access to these analytic services from other platforms. And that's part of what is behind the drive for APIs and for our analytics, part of what's behind the investigation of development platforms like Cloud Foundry. One other thing we're interested in is this notion of architectural hoisting, that a rising tide of common architecture and common components can lift all boats, right, bring all of our solutions up to a common level in the water. We do that today with some things we have. We have a logon application. It's a single point for customers to plug in their single sign-on providers. There's a single way for web applications to theme themselves. There's a single library for people to get connections to our analytics servers. And Cloud Foundry has some of those same capabilities. If I push the app there, I can scale it with Cloud Foundry. If I push an app there, the health manager is going to watch that and make sure it's reliable and available like I want it to be. Maybe the most important part of the architectural hoisting we have at SAS is what I talked about earlier, that multi-vendor architecture. It's been the core of SAS's success for a long time, this ability to easily move our analytics engine across whatever operating systems customers were interested in. But we're seeing that story start to change a little bit. There still is an operating system of choice, but more and more we're getting questions from customers about infrastructure as a service of choice. And that's one place where Cloud Foundry and related projects like Bosch can dramatically hoist our applications up because they have a lot of value there. SAS, and my group, that's Technology Office, also has to consider our internal developer community. There's about 2,000 of them or so. And SAS has a pretty low turnover rate. So many of them have been here for a long time, 20 plus years of the 38 SAS has been around. They are the people who have been through the process before. They've made those changes. And so they know the effort it takes to take on new architectural styles. And they can be sometimes leery of that. It helps us in the technology office to be able to compare old and new and show how it's not quite as different as they might think. So one thing we did when we started looking at Cloud Foundry was to look at the standard Cloud Foundry architecture picture and overlay current bits of the SAS platform on top of it and see how well it kind of matches up. There's lots of commonality. SAS has its logon application. Cloud Foundry has the UAA component. Cloud Foundry has its DEA pool for running applications and build packs and such. SAS has been managing its own TC server instances. So with that, we can kind of shift the conversation, change the vernacular some, and not have to create it out of whole cloth for our developer community. With that baseline and purpose, let's talk about what we actually did, what projects we undertook. We've been aware of Cloud Foundry for a while, kind of watching, seeing what happened. We actually started heavily investigating it more in January this year. It's gone in fits and starts. But if we go back to our architecture picture, what we actually chose to do first is to take a look at a product suite called Visual Analytics. Visual Analytics is a set of products that's core to the BI, the business intelligence part of SAS. It deals with data visualization and reporting, those kind of things. VA is important because it ships with a lot of other products. So if VA is not running on Cloud Foundry, those other products are not going to be able to run there either. For this project, we chose to concentrate just on moving those Java middle tier pieces over. We knew they're going to be readily supported with a Java build pack. They use bits like Spring that are well known and supported. So we're going to be able to find ample information and examples of what to do. We still have to connect back to those analytics servers. We still have to connect back to the data sources, but we're going to use the user-provided service as part of this specific project so that we can really focus, fix the variables of what's going on. And once we get this going, we can always come back and try something different. And part of the reason for that is that this takes about 8 web applications to move, right? There's a lot of common infrastructure pieces, plus the VA services, plus those VA UI components. Most of the changes we found were related to our ownership of our TC server instances. We created those guys, we managed them, we controlled them, we configured them. And so we could do things in there that, because we're there by ourselves, just like if you're living by yourself versus living with roommates or in somebody else's house. So we found things like we had to take library dependencies that had moved up into the server lib directory and move them back into our application. We'd had JNDI resources that we'd had on the server tree, and we had to move that configuration back into our app. We had some assumptions in our code. There are places where we felt like, or we assumed that there was going to be a servlet context path always available. Cloud Foundry comes out of the box, it looks for, it has subdomains, so we had to account for those kind of things. So a lot of it's about pulling inward, making those applications more self-reliant, making them fit better to that 12-factor model that's out there. We did see other benefits besides just the Cloud Foundry ones. A lot of our applications are running on shared TC server instances today, so we see some contention around things like transaction logs. When those spread out across the isolated containers and warden instances, that contention goes away. Overall, it took one person a couple of weeks to do it. Once they got through the first couple of applications, there was a lot of repetition there, move these jars, change this config, and so on. I think it can help inform our architecture even if we don't solely target Cloud Foundry in the future. We still want a lot of these architectural qualities that we're getting out of these changes, but now we have something concrete we can kind of look at and do pros and cons of and consider moving forward. So after Visual Analytics, we wanted to port another application developed by another group and see how that worked. We chose SAS Studio. SAS Studio is an application that is a web-based editor for the SAS programming language environment. Most of the time, to this point, it's been a rich client desktop application. It's a little bit different from our typical solutions. It can fit into that bigger picture before and in those customer IT environments, but we also have a way to scale it down so that we can ship a small VM to a customer. They can run it just there as a single user on their desktop. It's got the same kind of components, but there's fewer of them when it's scaled down. So we have a smaller collapsed architecture, which means now we can focus on Cloud Foundry integration and specifically creating a service broker instead of using user-provided services for our stuff. There's only one web application here. The services and UI are co-located there, but we're making the same types of changes with jars and config files as before. The new bit is us writing that service broker for what is our SAS workspace server. So the workspace server is the main way that as you're typing the code into that SAS Studio instance, it's submitting that back to the backend server to run, and we call that the SAS workspace server. We're a Java and Spring shop. We use the skeleton project that Steve Greenberg created and blogged about to do that, and it let us, again, focus in on what are the requirements for a service broker, creating a service instance, binding those service instances, listing service instances, and not having to get so involved in the form of what RESTful method and endpoints and so on that were there. It took one person about a week to do that, and Pivotal was able to use that to demo at SGF, our user group conference, SAS Global Forum. So now that we've dove down into the specifics a little bit, I want to zoom out and talk about some of the larger takeaways SAS has from this. The software has a lot of stuff. right? There's probably some places, if you had a map of it, where we'd see this ancient screed, here be dragons, you're afraid to kind of touch a little bit. But some of the newer stuff was getting those same points. We were finding that applications were getting too big, taking too long to start up. We're having to change memory settings to tune them just so, right? And they were all telling us something. We didn't always want to listen. We didn't have to listen because we owned more of the stack. But the Cloud Foundry project forced us to listen, or we're going to lose benefits related to deploying in Cloud Foundry. We're going to have to customize Cloud Foundry. We're going to have to, we weren't going to get the benefit of the auto-scaling stuff that's just coming out, or we're going to have to fork the Java build pack to control the heuristics more closely. And I don't want to have to do that because I'm already doing that when I control TC Server fully, so I want to fit better into the platform than have to conform the platform around me. The work we did hoisting helped out, right? As we said, the process just fell in place. We're able to redefine, re-implement that single interface, and just use Spring to inject the different version of that, use Spring Bean definition profiles to easily switch out those and be able to have them side by side and just target the right thing with the active profile. What we're going to find, I think, is that given drivers and quality attributes that push you towards something like Cloud Foundry, it can be an enforcer for the kind of behavior we want, right? It encourages those behaviors. And applications that are deployed there, they have the kind of qualities that make them readily deployable elsewhere as well. We want things to be smaller and more focused. They need to start quickly. They need to be robust and non-fragile. Right? We want them to be self-sufficient, to do their own system interrogation and initialization, starting up and setting themselves up. Cloud Foundry rewards that behavior, and that makes it a win for us using it. It makes it a win for developers developing on it. It makes it a win for our customers ultimately deploying on it. You know, I showed this slide internally getting feedback, and somebody said it wasn't much of an enforcer because there's only one gun on the ship, right? And so I think that you're missing the guided cruise missiles that are beneath the deck, probably. And maybe that's an apt analogy that CF push and Bosch deploying these things look very simple, but there's a lot of heavy armament there making that stuff work in Cloud Foundry today. So those are the projects we've done, right? It's just a taste, but where does it leave us to go next? In the near term, we're still in the investigation phase of this. We've ported those major applications. We've seen what that takes. We've got to learn how to apply those lessons across the rest of the product suite. There's socialization that has to occur within SAS. These concepts are new to a lot of our developers, and so we've got to get that across. And we do that in large by putting it in the trial ring on our enterprise technology radar, and that can drive then some small discussions and lunch and learns and those kind of things for people from that information. Ultimately, SAS has got to make a decision about what is it to SAS, what is Cloud Foundry? Is it going to be another platform that we support? Is it going to be the preferred platform for some of our stuff? Or is it going to be the platform, kind of like we heard last night in some of those foundation panel discussions? A lot of that puzzle for us is about making those analytics available inside Cloud Foundry and how readily we can get them deployed in this kind of environment. So if we have positive decisions, there's several natural jumping off points for SAS. We have a cloud story. It's called SAS Cloud Analytics. We want to be able to sell that on our cloud, software as a service to the customer. We also want to be able to sell that as a private analytics cloud. The customer comes and gets it, deploys it on their infrastructure, deploys it on some public infrastructure that they purchased. We've tried some of that work. It's not the most trivial thing to do to move it across everything like that. So can Cloud Foundry and Bosch enable those deliveries in a more succinct and easy manner? Once it's running, we talked about we want to enable developers to really extend the value of SAS, drive up the value of the software and the return on the investment for the customer. So what analytical services can we make available in somewhere like the services marketplace? Right, forecasting, the ability to get the next 5 values, or maybe just access to our workspace server so you can build your whole own analytics flow around the data you have access to. Any of the network analysis or model optimization stuff that's there. Right, whatever we have, what do we want to make available? And finally, back again to some of that panel foundation panel stuff. Can we take whole SAS products and just ship them as deployable units into Cloud Foundry? Right, something like SAS Customer Intelligence, have it show up as a tile in the dashboard of Pivotal CF. Enter your prompt information just like you would for the Elastic Runtime. Click Go. All those virtual machines, all those services, all those apps are just there running for the customer, and they can manage them just like they do all their other enterprise applications. So that's the SAS case study. I think there's a lot of opportunity there for SAS. I hope maybe we're able to come back next year and talk about how we turn some of those might do's into what we actually did do. But thanks for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.